This is Taka speaking. I am a bug Pokemon catcher. It's day 3 of my hunt for a wild Butterfree. As I sneak about quietly through some tall grass in the Viridian Forest, a Metapod approaches me, seemingly protecting its territory. I run my hand over the 4 Pokeballs strapped to my waist, uncertain of who to choose. My fingers rest on the first one, which contains a small Abra I've had for a while. I briefly consider letting it gain some experience, but find it a tiring and annoying Pokemon to level up, and select my Pidgeotto instead. The powerful bird wipes out the Metapod with ease, and I continue on my way through the thick forest. With no luck finding a Butterfree, I let out a heavy sigh and admit defeat for the day as I head into Pewter City. As I head towards the local Pokemon Center to refresh my exhausted Pokemon, I notice a large and noisy crowd gathering about the entrance. I run up to see what the fuss is about, noticing 2 doctors rushing something inside on a stretcher. It is veiled by a blanket. I can't make out what it is. Near the crowd is a girl sitting on the ground, sobbing intensely. The mob seems to be anxious to get to the victim. A line of police officers are barricading the entrance. After some struggling with the group, the leader of the police squad, Officer Jenny, commands the crowd to leave immediately. Reassuring them there's nothing to be concerned about, she says that the medical staff have the situation under control and that details of this patient are confidential until further notice. The crowd slowly clears away, leaving the police squad and the distraught girl. I walk up to her as the police urge the people away and ask her what happened. She looks up at me with tears flooding her big blue eyes, managing to whisper, "Its face. You didn't see its face. My poor Pidgey. They found it with a porcelain mask over its face, and when they removed it, oh, it was awful." The police step in and help her to her feet, escorting her away for questioning. I feel quite confused and want to help, but don't know how. "There's nothing to see. Please move along, sir," Officer Jenny says, urging me to leave as the girl gives me one last upset look. The expression on her face haunts me as I continue on with my day, becoming frozen in my mind like a photograph. I try to resume my hunt for a Butterfree, but it's no good. I'm too worried, hoping I might see that poor girl again. I stop by Pewter City once more for something to eat, heading to the diner by the Pokemon Center. As I head inside, I notice someone being hurried out of an ambulance near the entrance. Only the face is covered on this one by a porcelain mask. I can tell by the body it is a Ninetales lying on the stretcher. I squint to get a better look as the Pokemon appears to be firmly strapped down and convulsing intensely. A soft whimper comes from underneath the mask covering the victim's face. The horrible sound makes me cringe. The men pushing the stretcher hurry inside, a Nurse Joy holding the door open for them and immediately shutting it after they enter. I forget the hungry growls in my stomach and head over to see what the fuss is about. Something must be up. The usual Pokemon battle injuries are never this serious. Walking inside the Pokemon Center, I almost instantly notice the girl from earlier conversing with a few doctors. She appears to be quite anxious. One of them pats her arm as he speaks to her. She slowly turns back to a waiting chair, and the doctors walk away down a long hall. I notice an empty seat next to the girl and reluctantly approach her as she wipes her eyes, pushing back some of her dark black hair. She looks up at me, wondering what I want. "Is this seat taken?" I ask nervously, pointing to the one next to her. She shakes her head, and I sit down by her. "I remember you from earlier," she speaks in a distraught voice. I can tell she has been weeping for quite some time. "I found my Pidgey in front of this Pokemon Center this morning. I don't know how it got here. It was safe in its Pokeball last night when I went to bed. I was completely terrified when I found it. It could barely move. They said it will eventually recover, but not for long." I noticed the girl keeping her face hidden behind her hair, her head drooped over a bit. A tear falls from her nose, splattering between her feet. "Any luck on being able to see your Pidgey soon?" I asked curiously. The girl bites on her nails nervously. "The doctor said I can take it home momentarily. They're almost done repairing its face until I bring it back in for another operation." "What happened to its face?" I asked. The girl shuddered and clearly upset. "It isn't so much its face. I don't care how much the surgeries cost. The doctors say they will gradually be able to take care of the physical mutilation. It's just, my dear Pidgey is so much more broken on the inside because of this tragedy. That is something neither the doctors nor I can heal. I don't know who did this, but Pidgey was terrified when I found it, completely out of its mind. It never did anything to deserve this. I doubt it will ever be the same bird I once knew. It can never go back. Never." The girl tried to contain herself as she quietly wept. We both looked up as the large doors of the operation room slowly swung open. A doctor held it open as another carefully wheeled out a patient. The one controlling the wheelchair motioned for the girl to come up. She hurried out of her seat up to them. I was having trouble seeing the patient, which I assumed was her Pidgey. I began to walk up to join them, but another doctor stepped in, saying I was not allowed back there. Over his imposing shoulder, I caught a glimpse of the Pidgey. A strange device was strapped to the Pokemon's head, a mask meant to imitate the original shape of its face. It was white and dull in features, but did have a similar appearance to a Pidgey's face. I was a bit taken aback, but only saw it for an instant. I went back to my seat, wondering what had happened to that poor Pidgey. I quickly left to head back over to the diner for a bite to eat, hoping some food would take my mind off the victims next door. Just as I was about to sit down at a booth and feast my eyes upon the enticing menu, I noticed the girl walking down an empty dirt path, wheeling her Pidgey along. I quickly left and followed after her. "Hey, wait up!" I called out as I hurried up the path. She turned to watch me catch up, gasping. "Stay away, you horrible beast! Stay away!" she cried, running away in terror. I watched her flee, wondering why she had become so frightened by my appearance. Without much else to do now, I decided to give my Butterfree hunt one more go. Again, I didn't find the Pokemon I was looking for, although I did find a nice group of Metapods within the branches of a large tree. I struck a fallen tree limb into the ground near it and tied an orange headband about it to mark the tree. Surely those Metapod would bloom into Butterfrees within a few days. As I was heading back into town for a place to rest for the night, I was drawn to a nearby humming. It was coming from a small fire outside a house. I came over curiously to find the girl and her masked Pidgey. Looking up and noticing my presence, she waved with a small smile. "It's you again. You're out late," she remarked. "I was in the woods trying to catch a Butterfree," I answered. "Do you not remember what happened earlier today?" I asked, concerned. She thought for a moment, then answered, "Yes, when we were at the Pokemon Center." "No, I mean after that." She slowly put on a confused expression. "I don't know what you mean. I didn't see you again until now." "Oh, by the way, my name is Matsu." "I am Taka. You're out a bit late as well." "I was cooking up a snack for Pidgey. It can't eat much aside from soft foods and liquids, so I'm making some soup." It was now I noticed the small pot suspended above the hungry flames. Glancing over at the near motionless Pidgey, it looked as lifeless as ever with that mask still drawn over its face. As I sat by Matsu, I asked, "Is your Pidgey doing any better?" Matsu shook her head as she sipped at a cup of hot tea. "Many suns and moons will pass before that poor bird recovers. All I can do for now is feed it and be there for it when it feels the need for compassion. They say there have been others." I looked over at Matsu, asking, "What do you mean, others?" "There have been multiple Pokemon appearing in front of the Pokemon Center, driven completely mad and wearing those porcelain masks to cover." She could not finish her sentence. "I'll tell you someday when it's not so unbearable." "It's fine," I reassured her, although I was somewhat curious. "It's gotten so bad they've been showing up every morning, sometimes more than one at a time. They can barely move, only convulsing frantically, as if because of their suffering. Nurse Joy has been terribly worried about these poor Pokemon. She says they are inconsolable, and that I was lucky to be able to take my Pidgey home so quickly. We heard a slight rustle come from some trees close to us. I hurried over to inspect, but found nothing. "What was that?" Matsu asked. "I don't know. I think I'd best find a hotel to spend the night at, and you should get inside." Matsu peeked inside the soup pot. "It's almost done. Pidgey and I will head inside after it's ready. Hopefully, we will meet again," Matsu said with a small smile. I nodded, agreeing, hopefully. With a small wave, I continued on my way. The path to the town felt quite dark and lonely. As I headed deeper into the loneliness, away from Matsu's company, I became a bit uneasy. It felt as though someone was watching me. I stopped walking and looked around slowly, analyzing the dark trees. I could hardly see, everything was pitch black. Feeling that cold chill that creeps up your spine when you're afraid, I hurried along to find somewhere to stay, trying to focus on the dark path ahead. Fortunately, a hotel was close by. I hurried inside and checked in for the night. Most of the next day was spent hunting for a butterfree once more, with no luck. Some of the metapod in the marked tree had disappeared, leaving only their empty shells behind. This did give me some hope. They must have evolved. I visited Matsu again that night. Sitting near her by the fire once more, I warmed my cold hands. "Any luck with your Pidgey yet?" I asked curiously. Matsu shook her head, saying, "Pidgey has been having nightmares of its attacker. A massive beast, Pidgey says it is. Its face is the worst part, unbearable to look at." The thought of a large creature attacking all these Pokemon made me uneasy. Hopefully it will leave soon, whatever it is. Matsu played with her hair, gazing into the fire. Based on Pidgey's description of the monster, I've never seen anything like it. Her words made me even more nervous. I think I should get going. I'd hate to be its next victim," I said, standing up slowly. "You should get to a hotel, somewhere safe." "I'll do that. You make sure to look after yourself as well," I said. We said our goodbyes, and I headed on my way. Once again, I was immersed into the lonely darkness. The snap of a nearby twig caught my attention. I figured a tree limb may have fallen, and kept walking. But another one snapped, closer this time. I froze in place as I heard some rustling in the bushes surrounding the path. Whatever it was seemed to be heading right for me. My heart pounded like a sledgehammer as my legs trembled. I began to run when the cause of the noise appeared, freezing me instantly. It was a large Arcanine, definitely a wild one. This seemed highly unusual. Arcanine did not live in this area. It slowly approached me, pulling its lips back to reveal 2 rows of massive fangs, glistening with saliva in the dim moonlight. A low, deep rumble crawled out of its throat as it locked its eyes on me. I slowly reached down to unleash one of my Pokemon from their Pokeballs. When all I felt was my belt, I looked down to see my row of Pokeballs were gone. As the beast stepped closer, I noticed the large, sharp claws on its paws, the fur on its back raised. I could sense something was wrong, very wrong. I did my best to not move a muscle, despite my overwhelming terror. As the Arcanine drew closer, I looked down to meet its gaze. The moment my eyes met the dog's, it snarled even more fiercely, looking enraged. Immediately averting my eyes, my hands trembled as the beast walked up to me and sniffed deeply at my side. I could feel its cold nose rubbing against my skin, its quick exhales and inhales pulling and pushing at the air by my arm, giving me goosebumps. The animal let out a loud snarl that made me wince and squeeze my eyes shut. When I opened them, I looked down at the Arcanine to see its face was gone. Only its nose and the exposed flesh remained. An eerie voice asked in almost a whisper,
"Why didn't you save me? Why weren't you there?"
As its mouth moved with the words, I could see the muscles contracting and stretching. In absolute horror, I stumbled back, tripping over a fallen log. Hyperventilating, I backed away as quickly as I could until I bumped into a tree. A small group of figures began to appear from the bushes, drawing closer. They were all Pokemon missing their faces. Their mouths curled back into wicked smiles, approaching as they chanted their pleas for my help. So afraid I could not even cry out in terror, I climbed to my feet and ran as fast as I could. They did not follow after me, their voices fading into the darkness as I dashed away. However, a flock of Firo and Spiro were in pursuit. Capable of much higher speeds than I, they soared ahead of me only to turn and force me to see their skinned faces, no matter which way I went. In the distance, I could see the Pokemon Center. Feeling a small ray of hope, I ran even harder to reach it, to reach some form of safety. The air whirled my hair about as the birds flapped their large wings close to my head, one of them flying right by me, its ghastly face just inches from mine. For the first time, I managed to scream out my terror. I screamed like I never had before, my mind being ravaged with the fear I'd never known. I understood in that moment that this is what true horror felt like. To wonder if you'll make it out of what you can only fathom as a nightmare, if there even is a way out, or if you're stuck in it forever with no chance of waking up in your safe warm bed to discover there was no danger at all. But this was not a dream. It was real. It was happening right in front of me. Reaching the Pokemon Center, I dashed inside like a madman and slammed the door shut. "What's wrong?" Nurse Joy asked, seeing the terror in my face. I rushed behind the counter she stood at. "They're coming! They're coming!" I said, shaking as I hid under the counter, covering myself. "Who's coming? I don't see anyone," Nurse Joy asked, confused. I heard her kneel down to my level and felt her hand gently rest on my shoulder. "Why don't you come on out? It's all right," she assured me. I nervously peeked through my fingers to look at her, only to see her face had also been skinned. As I let out a horrified scream, everything was lost in this bright white flash, like a blinding thunderbolt. And then, I was in a small room, still screaming as Nurse Joy tried to calm me down. Her pretty face was back. Everything looked normal. "It's okay, you're all right," she said, trying to get me to be quiet. I looked around, breathing hard. The room we were in seemed to hold just a few medical cabinets and the bed I was lying in. "What happened? Where am I?" I asked. "You're in the Pewter City Pokemon Center. I found you unconscious outside the building. You were running and screaming before you collapsed." I slowly let her words sink in as my breathing relaxed a bit. "That's right, I was. They were following me." Nurse Joy gave me a confused look. "Didn't you see them? The bird Pokemon, with no faces. I was trying to get away from them." The young woman shook her head, saying, "There was no one there. I saw you rushing towards the building. You were alone. Have you consumed any alcohol or hallucinogens?" I shook my head, trying to make sense of what I had seen. "I didn't imagine it. I saw them. They were real. I could feel the wind of their wings, see the flesh on their faces." Nurse Joy put a hand on mine, quietly hushing me. "Just relax. We'll figure out what happened." I nodded as I looked down to find my Pokeball strapped securely to my belt. "Can you stand?" the nurse asked. "Yes," I replied. "Please follow me then." I rose to my feet and obeyed Nurse Joy's requests. She led me to the main lobby where Officer Jenny was waiting for us in a corner. "Officer Jenny would like to ask you some questions, if you don't mind." "Not at all," I answered, sitting across from the police officer. She was in her full police attire as usual, her hat resting under her arm. This was the first time I had seen her without it on, exposing her blue hair. "This encounter you had may have had a connection to the recent appearances of the faceless Pokemon at this particular center," she explained. "So you say you were attacked by these creatures?" I nodded, looking down a bit. "What did you see when the attacks began?" she asked, pulling out a notepad and a pen. Taking a deep breath, I slowly began to explain what I had witnessed. After some time, it seemed Officer Jenny wasn't buying my story either. "I know what I saw. I'm not crazy. I'm not on drugs. These things were real," I said in a frustrated tone. Suddenly, we heard a small rustle near the front door. All three of us looked over to see a motionless Pokemon being set down on the ground. It appeared to be a Drowsy, with the porcelain mask strapped to its face. There were 3 more Pokemon lying by it, all with their faces covered. We hurried outside, Officer Jenny leading the way, to see a small hooded figure gliding off down the main path. It was wearing a cloak of some sort, and appeared to be floating over the soil. "Stop right there!" Officer Jenny shouted, chasing after the mysterious figure. It looked back at us to reveal a mask veiling its face, the same kind on the victims. "Stay here," Officer Jenny ordered. I felt a strange urge to discover who that was. I usually obeyed authority, but this time I had to know. I took off after the 2, making sure to stay hidden so Officer Jenny would not catch me following them. "Freeze, or I will shoot," she commanded, keeping one hand on her pistol in its holster. After a few moments, I saw her whip it out and fire a shot directly at the figure. The gunshot cracked like thunder, echoing into the distance. It seemed to have no effect. The bullet was blocked by some invisible force. The figure turned, still hovering above the ground, and reached out a hand. Officer Jenny's pistol was twisted into a deformed piece of metal. She dropped it, gasping in fright. Suddenly, she seemed to be suffocating, desperately trying to inhale. She fell to her knees as she struggled to fight the unseen force choking her. We all watched in surprise as Matsu rushed out onto the path behind the figure, hurling a Pokeball at it. It seemed she was trying to catch it, but the ball was knocked away by the figure's powers, landing near its feet. The ball opened, releasing a Butterfree. "Butterfree, stun spore!" Matsu called out. The cloaked figure was showered with an overwhelming flurry of sparkling dust. "Good thing you marked that tree those Metapod were in. I got one right before it evolved," Matsu said to me with a small smile. The cloaked figure seemed to be frozen, struggling to move as it fell over. Officer Jenny sucked in a huge gasp of air as the force released her, clutching her throat gently. We all slowly approached the mysterious figure as Matsu kept her Butterfree on standby in case another stun spore was necessary. I, being the first to reach the culprit, I pulled back the hood on its head to reveal 2 pointy yellow ears. I noticed a tail sticking out of a hole in the cloak. "This must be an..." I slowly pulled the porcelain mask off to reveal the identity.
"Yes, that's right. An Abra,"
the figure said as its face was finally seen.
"Your Abra, Taka."
"I don't understand. Why did you skin the faces of all those innocent Pokemon, Abra?" I asked, horrified. The Abra let out a weak chuckle.
"Innocent? Is that what you call them? They're all guilty. Guilty of being too weak to be true Pokemon."
"What do you mean?" I asked.
"Of course you wouldn't understand. You selfish humans only use us as pawns in your nonsensical battles. Pokemon should not live this way. We should have become the dominant race of this world before you humans decided to turn us into your pets, your puppets. We are capable of far more than you can ever imagine. And so it is, there are far too many Pokemon content with living under the rule of a mere child following orders. This had to come to an end, so I drove them mad and skinned their faces as they begged for mercy, like the pathetic weaklings they are. Such pitiful creatures do not deserve the faces or minds of true Pokemon."
Abra managed to fight the stun store a bit, slowly reaching into its cloak pocket. We all quickly backed away.
"I no longer mean to harm you. There's no need for fear. You humans are so quick to resort to it. Such weakness."
Abra revealed a pair of bloodied knives, dropping them to the ground.
"These were once spoons that belonged to a Kadabra, my first victim, the first cleansing of an otherwise futile life."
Officer Jenny inspected the weapons closely. "These have been used countless times," she said. "There are so many mixtures of skin and fur left on the blades."
"Taka, look at my face,"
Abra slowly pleaded. I turned my gaze back to my Pokemon.
"I should be thanking you for hardly ever training or caring for me. Your greed has brought this true meaning to my attention. I was only using you to eventually evolve into a Kadabra, and then hopefully be trained to become even stronger as an Alakazam. But this puny form had to do. You never loved me. I knew you wouldn't notice if I snuck out of my Pokeball at night. I am the one responsible for those visions you saw earlier. And when that girl became terrified of you, I was merely toying with you. The so-called monster the girl's Pidgey saw was a mere illusion. I couldn't let anyone know my true form. Since at one time even I was content with being under your pitiful command, I too must suffer.
The Abra slowly reached up to a small cut on its forehead and carefully dug a claw into it. Giving it a gentle tug, we watched in horror as the laceration quickly spread and encircled its face. Peeling the skin off, Abra tossed it aside as though it were a mere mask.
What you see now is the last thing all those Pokemon saw before they succumbed to insanity. Despite my own weakness, what I have done to change these creatures will be remembered. They will appreciate the unique powers they possess.
Officer Jenny shook her head and averted her eyes, trying to clear away the disturbing image of Abra's skinless face.
And so, now that my work has come to an end, my own punishment must be finished.
Abra slowly rose to its feet. What are you doing?
I will use my psychic abilities on myself. Just as they all lost their minds, so will I.
A white aura slowly surrounded Abra. We could only witness the horror as it clenched its head tightly, screaming out in agony as it stumbled about aimlessly. Abra seemed to be in incredible mental torment, unbearable pain. The aura became brighter, so bright we had to shield our eyes. A sudden flash erupted from Abra, and then the light was gone. My Pokemon was breathing heavily and spontaneously twitching, sweat dripping off its face. With a crazed grin, a kind I had never seen before, it chuckled quietly and eventually burst into an unexplainable, insane fit of laughter as it convulsed helplessly.